Welcome to Talk Commerce, where we explore how merchants, agencies, and developers experience commerce. This week, we interview Sonja Franz with Internet in Germany. We discuss the Magento Community, online events, and the Magento Association. We talk about diversity in the tech community and what everyone can do to help be more diverse, even bald white guys like myself. We touch on the new Hoofa theme and finish it with some ballroom dancing. You can't miss this episode. The Talk Commerce podcast is sponsored by SwiftOtter. E-commerce developers solve problems daily. In fact, some of those seem like mountainous hurdles that must be climbed in a matter of hours. Stress levels can go through the roof. No wonder the plague of burnout affects developers too. But there's a vaccine for that. Investing time in your career will take you farther than you ever imagined. Meet SwiftOtter. SwiftOtter exists to help you become the e-commerce hero that is indispensable and irreplaceable at your company. We do this through Magento certification study materials and Joseph Maxwell's most recent book, The Art of E-commerce Debugging. Go to swiftotter.com to learn more about how you can quickly climb the ranks in your quest to be a better developer. While you're there, use the coupon code TALKCommerce for 15% off any digital goods at swiftotter.com. This episode is sponsored by eWay Corporation, the partner of choice for technology, infrastructure, and enterprise-level digital solutions. An AWS Select Consulting partner. eWay Corporation. Forward together. My name is Brent Peterson, and I'm your host. Please remember to subscribe wherever you download your podcasts. And now, Talk Commerce. Welcome to Talk Commerce. Today I have Sonja Franz from Germany. Cologne, Germany, is it?
Almost. Aachen, yes.
Aachen, okay. So Sonja, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us what you do and what some of your passions are.
Okay, my name is Sonja Franz. I'm the marketing manager at Internet. I've been involved with the Magento community for 8 years now. I'm passionate about events, and I'm today wearing a t-shirt that I got at a Magento event, which is not so unusual for me. One of my passions is ballroom dancing, which I just recently, yesterday, got to, revive after some months of absence. And I'm also currently working on my master's thesis for communication and industrial psychology. And I'll write the thesis on a topic that touches on e-commerce.
Wow, that's very, very exciting. So you could work with Guido on his cognitive thingy stuff that he does, or I don't even know what he does actually. Cognitive psychology or something?
Yeah, I think he's done a lot more in the real psychology part, and I'm more to the communications department. So
okay,
yeah. But that's
great.
It's an interesting part. I mean, human brains are just fascinating, and I guess we see with machine learning that human brains are still a different class.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that we continue to learn a little differently than machines. But who knows what's going to happen? Skynet. All right, so let's jump right into events and community. So I know that one thing that we've both had in common for quite a long time is moving Magento events from specifically developer focus to a broader focus. Can you just kind of speak to some of those older, more traditional events? And did you feel like those older events were really geared toward developers?
So one of my first Magento events I attended was the Meet Magento Germany in 2013, and they had a tech track and a business track. And I think I didn't even attend one talk in the tech track, but just stayed in the main business part. And back then, it was kind of funny because the business main track really had the big room, and the tech people, which were actually more, had another room in the lower floor which had not the best lighting, not enough oxygen for everyone in the room, and it really felt a bit like they could have adjusted more to the majority of attendees. But on the other hand, it was always a struggle to get merchants to attend events because they bring the money and for the whole space. So there's always this conflict of interest that on the one hand, you get a lot of developers to attend and you want to cater to them, but you also want to get it, have a better experience for merchants who attend. Back then, I was somewhat in the marketing / project management role. It was, the developers had had a pre-party on the Sunday before the event. And back then that was really a developer meeting, basically. So you had to know who would organize it, had to follow them on Twitter, otherwise you probably wouldn't have heard about it at all. And then it became more and more to this combination of having a hackathon at the Meet Magento Germany on the weekend before the actual conference, which meant that you had really, at some point, people attending the hackathon and then leaving town when the conference started. And for me, then attending a hackathon was seeing all these guys working on stuff I didn't really understand, but thought it was cool. So I kind of grouped with any other project manager I could find at these gatherings and trying to find a topic we could work on, and that led me to translations. I think it's really a good thing to have events where both merchants and developers and project managers and marketing people meet, so they could have more of an exchange of what's going on, what's important to them. But it's a really hard task to make an event that's good for all of them.
Yeah, it's very difficult. My first speaking event was in Germany in 2014. It was at Magento Live in Munich, and I chose a topic that I thought would be targeted directly to merchants. And it was about how you communicate in a project management, or as a project manager in a project, and how lots of communication helps, and all kinds of topics about customer experience and making sure customers are happy in those topics or in that format. And at the end of my presentation, all the questions I had were from developers, and everybody after, the only people that came up and asked me questions were developers. There were things like, oh, I didn't realize I should be talking to the customer all the time about something, or all those different things you think about as a project manager. Developers oftentimes don't think about those things, which goes to the importance of having another view on a tech sort of conference. And it could be project management, but it could also be marketing, because marketing has topics that have to go to developers to make sure that it's marketed correctly. And I think you would agree that a developer thinks a little bit differently than a marketer.
Yes. Yeah. Well, both have their prejudices of the others, which doesn't help. And I can understand both views. I've spent so many years now working closely with my team of mainly developers, and they're great people. But I also see some of the humor that's in some of those prejudices in real life, and it's like, yeah, true. And they say like, oh no, all these marketing blah blah, and they're just gonna hot air division, like put stuff out that's or fake it till when it's not even made at all. But yeah, it's definitely something that where a close exchange between the two groups would help. And then what you say, like if you are at an event and the audience is not what you expected, that's also difficult, because sometimes I feel like it's a tough job for the organizer to realize beforehand who's going to attend. They have to get in the data with the registration, and then they might not even know who's going to attend which track. But I think it's also a job for them to make sure the speaker knows who's going to be there listening to them. And yeah.
Did you say hot air division earlier? That was the
yes.
marketers are in the hot air division, because it could be said too that developers are also put into a hot air division. They're full of bloat and words that English speakers wouldn't say. Although I've heard some very funny talks from German speakers about poor language, or the reason that non-English speakers use the F word and the S word in their public presentations. That's of course another topic, and I don't want to get us off track. All right, so let's move on to online events. And I just recently watched, I think one of the HUFA meetups you did, where you kind of moderated that event. Tell us a little bit about how you feel online events are going, and maybe where you think they're going to be now in the future, that we can both do online and in person.
So I think it's really great to see lots of meetups now switching to online, because they just keep it rolling. I mean, we have it with a local Magento meetup, and now we're starting this Hoover meetup, because we see there's marketing word demand in the community around Hoover to actually have a space for to talk to others. I mean, that's a Hoover Slack, which is really active. But I feel like some things are better explained in a video or in a talk, or in sometimes even chat that's going on. Well, the online meetups or online events in general have this really great advantage that it's a lot easier to attend. I've heard you talk about your hackathon plans in Florida, which is an awesome idea. But even from a privileged German perspective, I'd say, wow, going to Florida for hackathon, I'm not sure I'm going to go. I would like to, but it's lots of different consideration going on. And just signing up for an online event is a whole lot easier, usually for free or cheap. It's a lot less effort for me as an attendee. I could just sit there in my pajamas on the sofa and just watch it, or if I feel like engaging more, I could use probably a chat alongside it, or use networking features or whatever else is available. And there's lots and lots of new things, I think, going on, or maybe I just haven't bothered looking before 2020. For example, the hop-in platform that many Magento events use, and that we also use for the Hoover meetup, where you have this 101 networking stuff going on, and you just say you want to go networking, and then there's another person popping up. And well, for me, oftentimes I know those people already, but it's still always nice to meet just someone new and have this excitement of a first exchange, and maybe exchange contact details afterwards, or just give them a tip on a topic they're currently researching on, or learn more about. And I think it brings the community more together. I mean, imagine how Hoover would have started if there weren't any online events. For 2020, probably it would have been hard to hear anything about it at all without any announcement at an online Reacticon and without an online launch party and without the following online user meetup. It would have probably been tweets and blog posts, and I'm not sure it would have gotten that much traction as it has now. And yeah, it's as I said, a lot less effort. So I think it's easier also for people who even in normal times can't make it to events, maybe because they have difficulty to get the travel budget or family responsibilities. So it's a lot easier for them to join in. And yeah, so I think it's gotten a really nice thing for us to experience this now, to learn how to do online events, and I can understand everyone who wants to go back to normal in-person events, but I'm not 100% sure that we're going to go back to the way it was before.
Yeah, I just want to make one clarifying point on what you said earlier about the hackathon in Orlando, Florida. And I realize now that I need to start changing my message just a little bit. It is going to include an unconference as well, so we can be inclusive to all people. And I would like to get Adobe Docs or Magento Docs or whatever merch docs they called it, but I do want to make it fully inclusive, and it's not only for hackathons. I mean, it's not only for developers. And it is at Disney World. So I also want to just say that Disney World is also not just for developers. It's also for everybody else in the world that would like to go to Disney World. So that's my only clarifying point on that previous statement. So going back to online events, I think that now we have an opportunity to do the hybrid style event where you have in person with a streaming video for people watching. And I actually had a pleasure of attending an event similar to that about a month ago in Texas, where the main presenter was on the big screen, and we were sort of a satellite event that was happening. And there was a number of events happening all over the world with sort of a central event happening in a place with a fancy camera and a setup like that, where we were sitting in a room with 25 people watching a big screen. That was a good way to do it. And I think the presentation from a presenter to an audience gives a different feel than it does when you're just talking to a screen, something like this. Can you comment a little bit about where you think events are going to be in that format, so hybrid versus this one-on-one talking to a screen type of thing?
I assume that the bigger events will turn to a hybrid model, and the smaller ones like local meetups will probably go back to local in-person events either, or online events. Because what I see already is that the meetups even become a lot more professional. You have to have some kind of moderator, and you have to maybe put in some more effort to get the word out that the event is happening, and to make sure that people actually attend, because, well, who's going to show up for an online event that they just automatically clicked on to register? And it's like just one more notification from their smartphone saying the calendar invite is now open or whatever. So I think it's, for the smaller events, a lot more effort to bring a good hybrid event around. You have to have the technology of a good microphone for the speaker, a good camera, someone who actually makes sure that everything is running smoothly in the background. Whereas beforehand, for our local meetup, it was like, setting up the event in meetup.com and in Xing, the German network, and do a bit of promotion. And then you buy some drinks and some snacks, and people show up, and you basically have some last minute cleanup in the office and maybe just have a really last minute chat with a colleague who's gonna do the moderating role this day. And that's it. And it would be, yeah, I feel like with an in-person event where people can just move around, they, especially if it's just a local meetup, they don't really expect that much. But if you have an online event or a hybrid event, and that's not really moderated well, then it's getting really hard to focus on the event and follow it. So yeah, I think it's there are some meetups who have a more professional, let's say, approach. I think we can count ours to it, and sometimes I wonder if it's too professional now. Because meetups also in the Magento sphere, I think, should be the really easy stages for people who want to have their first talks and get into public speaking. And if you already have this super professionalized with lots of preparation and moderator doing a really good job, it might put people off. And I hope that we keep these meetups as as an easy first stage for anyone who wants to become a public speaker in the Magento sphere.
Yeah, that has been a topic around sort of the Meet Magentos and the Mage Titans and some of those events that allow presenters to come in and sort of test the waters to get some practice and things like that. I think part of the problem in that has been that some of them are very sectioned off, meaning, Mage Titans has always been developer event by developers for developers, which then excludes everybody else in the world on that particular product. And then, it also excludes the reason for a merchant to be there, because unless you're a merchant who is also a developer, they don't want to attend that event. I think that you're right. The importance of these smaller events for that reason, to help people to be better speakers, is one thing. And then I suppose the other thing would be, if you put aside meetups, so this sort of informal thing, and I agree with you, meetups shouldn't have a camera and shouldn't it becomes more of a Meet Magento type of thing, or of more of a formal event when you get a whole professional video studio set up to do it. But I do think that there is a space for this hybrid style, let's call it small event, that would maybe target 50 people or less, where you're doing a presentation, or even like you're doing for the Hoofa theme, where you're doing some specific presentations about the topic that helps people get educated. Do you feel as though we're going to lose out visitors who would click instead of join in person, or do you think that people are going to just drive to join in person if they can right now?
Well, right now, for me personally, we are in this situation where I second guess every time I go into the office, and we're now just starting talking about having some kind of a gathering of the whole team. So I'm still quite removed from having open public events with more than 2 people. So I'm so stuck on this social distancing stuff. I think what I see in our society these days is also that people question if we need to go back to traveling for the sake of attending conferences with regards to the environment. And so I imagine that there will be more people willing to actually attend online versions of events with that as a motivation. But still, I think it's from an attendee perspective and also from an organizer perspective, the in-person part is actually something you can't really copy online. It's you can't influence how the online attendees experience it. They see the screen, they hopefully have a good connection and hear the sound all right, but you can't have any influence on the light in their room or what it feels like, if the chair is comfortable, if they have a good snack before and after, and if they actually have this kind of connection they feel to the speaker. And that's something that you have a lot more influence on in in-person events. I don't know if you've seen it as well, but I think that sometimes online events, they're doing a really great job and the audience is still saying, yeah, it was okay. Whereas in in-person events, there will be a tweet storm coming and people blogging about it afterwards or telling their colleagues about it. And I feel like it's a lot harder to get people excited about online events than it is when they have attended in person.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. And I think it's going to be, I do think there was like this curve of we all started going online and then we got completely zoomed out. And, you know, in that first couple months of the pandemic, by May or something like that, we're all like, oh my God, I can't do more 12-hour Zoom days anymore. And now it went down and now we're kind of coming back. I think that some of these online events, and I'll put out like the Adobe Summit and the Magento Connect conference that was just recent, that I thought both of those were engaging. And maybe the Adobe one was done in a way that you didn't feel like you had to attend every single speaker because they're all recorded and you could go back and look at them. But the ones that were live or semi-live, I guess none of them were actually live, which is also sort of like, okay, well, but semi-live, and I'll put out sneaks. I really enjoyed the sneaks, and part of, I suppose part of it was Dan Levy was, you know, a big star, and it made it very entertaining. But it also was engaging, and the content was short enough where you didn't feel like you're sitting there for a half an hour watching somebody drone on about how to insert JavaScript into a presentation page or something like that. Not to disparage developers, because I used to be sort of a developer, but if you're not interested in the topic, then the more precise your topic is, the smaller your audience is, and the harder it is to keep them engaged. So I think that over time, we're going to find that balance as a community to figure out what makes sense. And a lot of this is right. A lot of them are going back in person. Just a small comment about the air travel. I am arranging a sailboat that'll leave from northern Germany. That'll take only a month, but we do have some exclusive spots that are leaving next week for Orlando in a rowboat. So if you'd like to try that, both of those are completely carbon neutral.
Perfect.
The rowboat,
please,
will take about 6 months to get there.
Okay, I guess while on the rowboat, I can't be on the computer, right? So I probably need to be on the sailing boat so I can shut myself up in the cabin and work on my master's thesis. That will be quite good. No distractions. Yeah. Sign me up.
Perfect. I think the rowboat version could have satellite as well as some kind of solar batteries recharging. It depends on the length of the rowboat, which I haven't confirmed yet. I believe it's bigger than 3 meters.
I guess we could ask the Vikings how to do this. I think they would know. Isn't that some of your heritage as well?
Yes, I'm Scandinavian, and there was a person from Minnesota that actually built a Viking ship back in the 70s, and he sailed it from, I don't know if he came from Duluth. Like Minnesota has the farthest inland port in the world, so we have ocean going vessels that come to our shores here in the middle of the country, and he sailed it all the way to Norway, I think, or something like that. But
Cool. Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome.
All right. Well, let's move on to the Magento Association. I have now joined as a membership as on the membership board, so I'm excited about the Magento Association. And yesterday I talked to Eric Irway, and he's sort of the liaison with Adobe and the Magento Association. Can you give us some of your insight on where that's at and how you feel it's going?
Okay, so I've been onboarded to the board of directors of the Magento Association, I think end of February this year. Well, with the motivation of getting more involved and see if we can actually have more people also engaging with the Magento Association. Because I felt like it was a bit too quiet around it for the last couple of months before that. So one of my first tasks was to help organize the Magento Association Connect, an online event we had in April with speakers from around the world. And I think one of the first things I noticed when getting more into contact with the Magento Association as a board member was that there was so much going on and no one knows about it, which is a shame. Because there are lots of critics around that say, well, there's going so much work maybe into the Magento Association, and it feels like there's nothing coming out of it. There is lots going on, and some of it isn't finished yet, so can't really be presented to the outside world. But I guess you know also now from your members committee that there is stuff going on. People are working on things. Well, I've also joined the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, which has one of its tasks to make sure that the Magento Association actually is open to anyone who works with Magento in some way, and making sure that everyone or all kinds of groups actually have a kind of representation in the committees and board, etc. And that we do our best to make sure that people feel welcome with the Magento Association. And then, because it's not enough yet, I also joined the Content Committee, which does, for example, the Commerce Co-op, a blog where people from the Magento community can actually reach out to have their articles published on the Magento Association blog. And that's also currently working on another content series to be coming out soon. No details yet. And I think it's a really nice way that there's, for example, you could just write a piece, especially for the Magento Association, to have this really broad audience there, or to have one of your previously published blog posts cross-post there. So I think it's a good way of collaborating there. And because we have so many people who actually do great articles about difficult stuff, and I think they deserve the audience they can get.
Yeah, so I'm very interested still in Magento and the association, obviously, since I seem to talk about it all the time. And locally here in Minneapolis, I'm on a board for entrepreneurs, and I happen to be the membership chair here as well. So I get to talk to all sorts of people. And I joined the diversity and inclusion board. And my first question was, well, after I joined, and just to be fully transparent, in Minnesota, in our entrepreneur chapter, I think we're 80% men and 20% women, and we're probably 90% white bald males. Or I know all that math doesn't add up, but I am the opposite of diversity. And I said, I questioned, why should I be on this board? Why should I be on the diversity board? And the answer was, people need to know, and you need to be aware. And to start anyways, they need as many people to be aware and put out the word that we need to be diverse in our community. And I think that for Magento, I'm going to say being diverse is getting more women involved would be one way, but then getting more people that are other than white males would be the next thing. Just to be fully, like, let's just talk. Like, I feel like we need to talk about these things to get them out there, and let's start pushing some boundaries to help and get people engaged. And honestly, at me as the membership chair in my own local little community here in Minnesota, people will come to our website and they see the board of directors, and the first thing they would say is, why should I join your organization? Like, there's 10 people on the board and they're all males, and they're all men, or they're all white males. So I think it's important that that message is put out, and that we continue to really push that topic. And in maybe in formats like this, or I know Sharon Lampert I just talked to her. She said, let's do a little diversity discussion online and make that a topic and then republish it.
Well, I think with your visual appearance as a white, bald male, sorry, you could be an excellent ally. And I think it's one of the difficulties of this topic of diversity and inclusion, that these days, often when you have these topics, it's, well, people from underrepresented groups attending. And what we need is people with the right power and networks to actually get this topic established and to make sure that we have progress. And that's something that shouldn't be only be the burden of those who are already members of underrepresented groups. Yeah, gender is one thing. And then there is, with looking at the Magento community, we have people from all over the world, except for the Arctics, I think, and Grandrons haven't yet been certified Magento developers. But there is so much more than just looking at how many women we have attending or how many men there are. There's the background of their job roles. Like, we always try to get more merchants involved. Well, there are a lot of people who have lots of years of Magento experience and engagement with the Magento community. But where are the newcomers? Where do we see them? How do we make sure that they actually have a space inside our community? And I think we have to make sure that we have a broad view on the different groups we have. It was one of the talks from Sherry, I think, back at Magento conference Netherlands, where she talked more with the focus on getting more women involved in the IT work field as developers. But she also mentioned that there is no such thing as the Magento community. It's Magento communities. It's different communities around the world, and they have different things they work on, different motivation, different issues, and it's well, oftentimes it's Europe and the US doing things, while there's so much going on in Asia. And we see it with the Magento Association, also everywhere with online events, that if you want to include everyone, it's really difficult. I mean, how do you schedule a meeting where anyone from Japan to India to Europe to the US to South America can attend without really having difficulties with the biorhythm?
No, you're exactly right. Then it is really, there's so many subcultures in there. And just thinking about our event that we put on in Mexico for the last 4 or 5 years, we started with a lot of English content. We started with an English first website and people are obviously, the mistake there is you don't start an event in a country that the Spanish is the language with an English first website and English content. It doesn't work unless you're in the Netherlands, which of course always works because they speak better English than I do. But you're exactly right that we need to have those specific conferences. And I would like to kind of talk a little bit about maybe where Magento, the old Magento Association and now the new Magento Association, one of my beefs or complaints has been the fact that previously to do a Meet Magento, they wanted to have a local person and they wanted to have X amount of money spent and they wanted to have some other kind of revenue thing around it. And then they were expecting that you should have 200 or 300 or 400 people involved. All those barriers made it nearly impossible for a country like Bolivia to ever put on a Meet Magento event. Nobody is ever going to do an event in somewhere where there's nobody doing an event and there's no interest in Magento. And there's no interest in Magento because nobody's there to bring interest to Magento. If you think about how Christians, how the Catholics colonized South America, which is not, I'm not condoning it at all. I'm not saying that they did a horrible thing, but what they did do is they brought this thing to them and they had missionaries that would go out and talk about they would go and talk about it and they would bring it to that region and then people would, I'm not going to go down that path because it's very controversial, but the point is that people have, there has to be Magento missionaries that go into that region and they have to plant the seeds to do the event and somebody has to organize it and then they have to get local people involved.
Yeah, I guess a nicer terming would be to have farmers who are responsible for grassroots movements. Yeah, I guess it would be a good idea to differentiate between how does Adobe phrase it, like the markets that are already established, like Europe and the US, and markets where they want to have a bit more of a footing, because like Bolivia, for example, would probably then be something that should be treated differently than if there's competing, let's say, agencies who want to create a Meet Magento Germany, because they probably then should have really lots of hoops to jump through to actually get a better organizer for the event. Whereas in countries where there's no prior Magento event, it should be a lot easier to set things up. But I'm not part of the Magento Association Events Committee, which is still another committee working. And I guess from what I've heard so far, lots of what they're focusing on is as they are somehow the, let's call it, steward of the Meet Magento brand. They want to make sure that those who actually put up the Meet Magento event have considered it well and do a great job about it. Yeah.
I agree that there has to be some kind of something around there. Let's go back to communications and the Magento Association. And I'm just going to be a little bit of a critic again right now, and just put out my 2 cents that some transparency and and I know you can't talk about everything and the board can't talk about everything, but something like a blog post with a vision statement or a roadmap, and then just some small topics around here's where we're going, and here we're at mid quarter, here's where we're going to be at. We practice something in our company called entrepreneurial operating system, where we have this thing called a vision traction organizer. So we get together every year and we talk about what is our vision for the year, but we also lay out what is our vision for 3 years and 10 years. And then we all break that into quarters, and we say we want to accomplish this small thing in a quarter. And then every week we get together and talk about where we're at in that thing. And I'm not saying that the Magento Association should adopt this, but the leader of or the whoever is the volunteer boss of Magento Association, I think it's the chairperson, that the easy thing or the transparent thing would be create a short video that says, here I am, here's where we're going, here's where we're at. And then once a month you could create a 5-minute video that says, hey, just checking in, I'm here if you have something you'd like to communicate, I'm here to listen to you. I think a lot of CEOs do that sort of a town hall format where people can voice some of their things, and then that gives it an opportunity to also present where we're at. The last thing that I'll comment on that we do is we do every quarter something called a state of the company that just says, here's how we did in that quarter. Here's how we did on our goals for that 90 days. And here's where we're going for the next quarter. So I know I just threw a lot at you there, and I'm not directing this to you in any way, but I do feel like there's certainly a lack of communication and a lack of transparency, which just leads to people feeling like it's sort of this tightly knit community that is making decisions where the broader community doesn't have a say so.
Yeah, it's a feeling of disconnection, and that isn't really helpful. So what there is the town hall. I think we had the last one in mid-April, and I think the next one is planned for September, which is still a lot of time in between. But I think it's a place where the Magento Association actually mentions what their plans are for the year, and what they're currently working on, how things are going. Yeah, I guess it might be easier to do these things for the company because you work on it every day compared to an association where people are volunteers and don't get paid for it. And then there is the company involved, Smith Buckland, that helps the Magento Association actually abiding all the rules around associations in the US and more. And I think we have, they actually make sure that we stay on course as well. But I guess it's not easy.
Yeah, no, I get it. So is there anything else that you'd like to kind of bring up about the Magento Association? We have like 5 minutes left, so we should probably wrap up here soon.
Watch this space, the Magento Association. There's lots in the works for this year already, to be published and made public soon. Also for merchants, especially for them actually. And yeah, I guess it's always a good time to join, and keeping an eye on opportunities that arise. I know it's not as transparent as people would hope for to how to get involved in some of the committees, etc. But we're working on it, making it better. And yeah, I guess if you have specific stuff you want to have considered, please reach out. there is lots of people interested in hearing from the community, and if you know someone who's on a committee, or just forward it to them. And there are lots of people, I think, who bring in broad ideas, broad variety of ideas already, and you can always have more.
Yeah, and I can say that since I'm on the membership committee, so I know things are happening, but I think that there is sort of people feel like there's a little bit of a black box where things go in and it comes out, and maybe a little more transparency around what's happening in between those town hall times. Those are super helpful. So just as we wrap up here, what interests you? What blogs are you following? What books are you reading? Are you any podcasts you'd like to mention besides Talk Commerce?
Okay, so since there's a lot of work to do and study stuff to read, I try to keep my free time reading to fictional stuff. So the last thing I read was from Matt Haig, The Midnight Library. Trigger warning, suicide attempt. But it left me with a more positive outlook on life. And I guess if you're looking for a new read, check it out. It's currently really hyped. Some people love it, some don't. Some think it's really superficial and not worth your time. Probably check it out and see for yourself.
All right, I'll get that in the show notes.
Yes. Yeah. And are we already at the shameless plug? Is that it?
Yeah, let's do the shameless plug.
Okay. Well, I've just been back to the dance floor yesterday after 7 months absence. And while my muscles are mainly gone, my muscle memory still works. And it's surprisingly well remembered all our choreographies. And I hadn't anticipated it, to be honest. And it's just so good to be back. And I feel so much better now after the exercise. And actually, dancing is an exercise that doesn't feel like exercising most of the time. So if you're looking for a new sport to try out in 2021, after all the social distancing is over, check out dancing. And there are dancing stuff you can do on your own. There are stuff you do in a group, stuff you do with a partner.
So if there was a wife that would like her husband to start dancing with her, is there any advice that you could give directly to a wife that is constantly saying to her husband, let's start dancing, it would be really fun? And if they'd been married for nearly 30 years and they still hasn't taken action on that, is there any good advice that you could give the husband to maybe listen to the wife every once in a while?
Try it out.
Okay.
So the funny thing is, I got married 1.5 years ago, and it was just a small, the official part in Germany with the government stuff. And we wanted to have the celebration half a year afterwards. And so we started a dance course, my husband and I, and he didn't really at all. So sometimes we were in the car towards the course, the dancing class, and he said, "Oh no, the car wants oil. Now we have to go back home." So he was trying everything not to go there. And then, well, pandemic hits, wedding celebration was postponed, no dancing. Then we got back to dancing for a while. Then it stopped again. Then wedding was cancelled completely, celebrations. And now that the dancing is back, he was actually more eager to go back dancing than I was. Probably because as a wife, I try to give lots of positive feedback on any progress he does during the dancing. And I guess that's maybe a hint for the wife. But if you try it out, don't criticize.
All right. Excellent.
Positive reinforcement.
So the other exercise that I've heard doesn't feel like exercise is the Heidelberg Marathon, or a 50K race that I think Vinay, Willem, and now yourself, we're going to all volunteer to do that together in 2022 probably. So I'm excited that we can embark on that experience. I know around Vinay's house there's no hills or mountains or anything, so it's much easy and
No.
flat. And there's a nice castle we can stop at to get a beer. And I don't know if we're going to do
Hmm.
that during the race, but
How
I've
many
heard
kilometers?
50K.
Nope.
Yeah. All right. I'll keep working on my technique.
Yeah, I guess it's you know, for me, running sometimes is really nice because it clears your mind, and sometimes every step is an effort, and often I prefer dancing.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been running every day now for about 410 days or something. So I agree that there's some of those days where it's just really hard and you don't want to do it. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Sonja, thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. This has been a very fun hour. And I know we were going to take 30 minutes, but it's been very informative. And thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Brent, or Brunt, or I don't know what
Yeah,
name you settled
don't
on.
ask Gisa, right? Have
Yeah,
a good evening.
you too.
Tschüss.
Have a good day.
Tschüss.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
The Talk Commerce podcast is sponsored by SwiftOtter. E-commerce developers solve problems daily. In fact, some of those seem like mountainous hurdles that must be climbed in a matter of hours. Stress levels can go through the roof. No wonder the plague of burnout affects developers too. But there's a vaccine for that. Investing time in your career will take you farther than you ever imagined. Meet SwiftOtter. SwiftOtter exists to help you become the e-commerce hero that is indispensable and irreplaceable at your company. We do this through Magento certification study materials and Joseph Maxwell's most recent book, The Art of E-commerce Debugging. Go to swiftotter.com to learn more about how you can quickly climb the ranks in your quest to be a better developer. While you're there, use the coupon code TALKCommerce for 15% off any digital goods at swiftotter.com. This episode has been sponsored by the partner of choice for technology, infrastructure, and enterprise-level digital solutions, an AWS Select Consulting partner, eWay Corporation. Forward together. Thank you again for listening. My name is Brent Peterson, and it has been my pleasure to be your host today. Please rate and subscribe to Talk Commerce. New shows out every week.